Have you ever looked at a series of, well, strange events, things that seem totally disconnected, but you get that feeling, that maybe there's something more, like a pattern hiding just beneath the surface?
Yeah, and what happens when someone actually starts trying to connect those dots? Sometimes it leads nowhere, but other times it can lead somewhere pretty dark.
Exactly. Today, we're doing a deep dive into one of those theories, one that's really unsettled a lot of people, the so-called Smiley Face Murders. We've gathered quite a bit of material, looked at different sources, really exploring the whole idea, but also the strong arguments against it.
Right. Our goal here isn't just to lay out the claims, but to look at the evidence, or lack thereof, and the counter-arguments, too. Why did this theory even start? Why does it keep coming back?
And why is it still so controversial? It's fascinating how different people can look at the same tragic events and come away with such wildly different interpretations.
Absolutely. It's a real case study in, well, maybe pattern recognition or maybe seeing patterns where there aren't any. We'll explore how these individual tragedies got linked together in some people's minds.
Okay, so let's get into it. The basic idea, the core of the Smiley Face murder theory, is this belief that there's a killer, or maybe even a group of killers,
targeting young, college-aged men, specifically drowning them and leaving behind a very particular calling card.
A smiley face.
Yeah. And the timeline is pretty specific, too. We're talking roughly between 1997 and 2008. During that time, you had over 40 young men, mostly white, found dead.
Yeah.
Drowned in rivers, lakes, across like 25 cities in 11 states. It's a widespread.
Wow, okay, 40 is a significant number. And you said mostly college-age.
Yeah, college-aged, often described as popular athletic types. And the pattern was they were almost always last seen leaving a bar or a party, often pretty intoxicated.
So the official line in most cases was accidental drowning, due to the alcohol.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was the conclusion most police departments reached. Tragic accidents, plausible on the surface.
Not everyone saw it that way. This is where the theory really starts, right?
Yeah.
With two specific detectives.
That's right. Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, two retired NYPD detectives. They looked at all these separate cases across different states. And they came to a pretty startling conclusion. They believed the deaths of at least 45 young men were just too similar to be coincidences. They thought it had to be connected.
Okay, so what were the specific connections they were seeing, beyond the victim type and being near water?
Well, those were key, of course. The demographic, young, white, college men, last seen drinking. Then the location often found in cold northern climates, usually in winter.
Right.
But the clincher for them, the really unsettling part, was finding a painted smiley face near where the body was dumped, or at least near the point where they believed the body entered the water, in at least a dozen cases.
A dozen cases with a smiley face nearby. That does sound specific.
It does. And sometimes there was another piece. The word Sinsiniwa.
Sinsiniwa? What does that mean?
Apparently it means rattlesnake in a Native American language. It was found near some of the smiley faces. So for Gannon and Duarte, this wasn't random graffiti. It was a signature.
So they had a pattern, they had a signature. Did they have a motive? Or a theory about how it was done?
They theorized that jealousy could be a major factor. These victims were often described as good-looking, athletic, smart. Maybe someone resented that. And as for how, they actually suspected an organized gang. They pointed to times when victims disappeared on the same night, but in different states. That suggests coordination, right? Not just one person acting alone, and certainly not multiple separate accidents happening identically.
An organized gang carrying out serial drownings across multiple states. That's a huge claim.
It is. And they were incredibly committed to it. Gannon and Duarte apparently used their own money, thousands of dollars, to keep investigating after official funding stopped.
Wow. That level of personal investment, it shows how much they believe they were onto something huge, something everyone else was missing.
Definitely. It wasn't just a job for them at that point.
Let's maybe look at the case that really started it all for them. Patrick McNeil, right, in 1997.
Yeah, Patrick McNeil, 20 years old, last seen February 97, drinking with friends in Manhattan. His body turns up 2 months later, 12 miles away in the East River.
Okay, so missing for 2 months. What made his case stand out from, say, a typical tragic drowning after a night out?
Well, several things just didn't fit. First, his body was found floating face up. That's really uncommon for drowning victims. They're almost always found face down.
Okay, weird. Anything else?
Yeah, the autopsy found ligature marks around his neck, like something had been tied there.
Ligature marks. Okay, that definitely doesn't sound like an accident.
Right, and then there was this really specific kind of gruesome detail. housefly larvae found on his body in the groin area.
Housefly larvae. Why is that significant?
Because those types of larvae usually need warmer indoor conditions to be laid. It suggested he might have been dead, maybe held somewhere indoors before his body went to the cold river.
Whoa. So he wasn't just in the water the whole time he was missing?
Probably not. Adding to that, the state of his skin, specifically under his feet, suggested he'd been in the water less than a day, even though he was missing for 2 months.
Okay, yeah. Face up, ligature marks, indoor fly larvae, short time in the water. I can see why that case would raise serious red flags.
Absolutely screamed foul play to Gannon and Duarte.
And there was another case, Chris Jenkins, that echoed some of these strange findings.
Yeah, Chris Jenkins, University of Minnesota student, 21 years old. Vanished Halloween night 2002 after apparently getting kicked out of a bar in Minneapolis.
Okay.
4 months later, his body is found in the Mississippi River, actually encased in ice.
Encased in ice. Wow, and how was he found?
Again, face up. And this time, with his hands reportedly folded across his chest. Just like McNeil, not the typical presentation for someone who accidentally drowned.
Face up, hands folded. It does seem oddly deliberate.
For the detectives, these weren't just oddities. They were seeing a pattern emerge, a very disturbing one.
And you mentioned Gannon had worked the McNeil case originally.
He had, yeah. And missing persons. Apparently, he'd promised McNeil's parents he wouldn't give up.
Yeah.
So when he retired, he teamed up with his old partner, Duarte, and they just kept digging.
Even spending their own money, mortgaging his house, reportedly. That's incredible dedication.
It really is. It became a personal crusade for them.
So they kept finding these connections. Did they find more smiley faces?
They did. Around 2003, there was a cluster of cases. 4 young men vanished in Minnesota and Wisconsin in just 40 days. That's when Gannon and Duarte really focused on the entry point into the water, not just where the bodies were recovered.
And that's where they found the graffiti.
Consistently, yeah. They said they found smiley faces nearby. They documented, I think, 22 faces in total across various cases. And here's another creepy detail. Gannon said 9 of those faces had horns drawn on them. Yeah, he called it an evil, happy, smiley man. That became, for them, the definitive signature.
Evil, happy, smiley man. Okay. So after years of this private investigation, gathering all this evidence, as they saw it, they went public.
Right. By 2008, Gannon and Duarte, now private investigators, held press conferences. They laid out their theory. These weren't accidents. It was serial murder. Maybe a gang, maybe one person, but definitely murder.
And they called the perpetrators psychopaths with no remorse. That must have caused a huge stir.
Oh, absolutely. It was all over the news. The idea of a roving band of killers targeting college students, it's terrifying. It captured the public imagination, for sure.
Okay, so it's a really chilling theory, and you can absolutely see how those details, the smiley faces, the victimology, it would grab people. But it's also been widely discredited, right? Police departments generally don't buy it.
That's the other side of the coin, yeah. Despite how compelling it sounds to some, law enforcement agencies involved, for the most part, haven't treated these as linked homicides. And there's been significant pushback against the theory itself.
Who led the charge on debunking it?
The most thorough job was probably done by a nonprofit group in Minneapolis called the Center for Homicide Research. Back in 2010, they put out this really detailed report.
Okay.
And they basically dismantled the whole smiley face killer idea, listing like 18 specific reasons why they believed the theory was false. It was a very systematic takedown.
18 reasons. Wow. What were some of the main points they made? How did they counter the detectives' findings?
Well, first, the smiley faces themselves. The report pointed out something pretty obvious but maybe overlooked in the hype. Graffiti is everywhere. And smiley faces, they're one of the most common graffiti symbols you can find.
Okay, that makes sense. They're just common.
Exactly. And they also noted that none of the smiley faces found actually matched each other perfectly. No. If it's one killer or one gang signature, wouldn't you expect some consistency?
Yeah, you probably would. Like a specific style.
Right. Plus, they criticized the fact that there were no clear rules for how close a smiley face had to be to the body location to be considered linked. Was it feet away? Miles away? That lack of criteria made the connection seem arbitrary to them.
Okay, so the core signature was maybe not as unique or consistently placed as it first sounded. What about the victims themselves? Did the report address the drownings?
Yes, and this was a crucial point. The vast majority of the bodies recovered showed no signs of premortem trauma, no defensive wounds, no clear evidence of struggle before entering the water, which you generally expect in a violent homicide like drowning someone.
So mostly consistent with accidental drowning, medically speaking.
Medically speaking, yes, in most cases.
Ugh.
The report argued that tragic accidental drownings involving intoxicated young men near water are, unfortunately, not uncommon.
And that word, Sinsiniwa, did they have an explanation for that?
They did. They pointed out that Sinsiniwa, while meaning rattlesnake, has been a common graffiti tag in parts of the Midwest for a long time, totally unrelated to these deaths. It wasn't some secret code unique to these cases.
So just another piece of common graffiti, essentially.
Pretty much. And they also brought up the method itself, homicidal drowning. It's just extremely rare for serial killers. It's difficult, messy, unpredictable. Killers usually opt for more direct methods. The logistics of pulling this off repeatedly across multiple states seem highly improbable.
Okay, so the Center for Homicide Research built a pretty strong case against the theory. What happened with the original detectives Gannon and Duarte? Did they keep pushing it?
Well, reports suggest that Gannon, despite his earlier commitment, kind of stopped actively researching the case around 2012. And apparently, both he and Duarte moved on to other, quote, more lucrative cases.
More lucrative cases. That doesn't sound great, especially for the families who might have put their hope in their investigation.
No, and that led to some real bitterness. Some families felt abandoned, or worse. There's a quote from Bill Zastak, whose son died in Albany ruled a drowning, but he believes it was murder.
Yeah.
He was deeply disillusioned with Gannon. He said he felt Gannon latches onto the families, sucks the life out of them, and when he has nothing else to suck, he dumps them. He even said Gannon had re-victimized families.
Wow, that's incredibly harsh and tragic. It adds another layer of pain for these families.
It really does. It highlights the potential damage when these kinds of theories gain traction but then fizzle out, leaving families still without definitive answers.
So you have this thorough debunking. The original investigators seem to have moved on. Some families feel burned. And yet the smiley face theory, it doesn't quite die, does it?
It really doesn't. It keeps popping up. Like after a Northwestern University student disappeared in 2012, his body was found, and apparently there was smiley face graffiti on a nearby tree. So the speculation started all over again.
And again in 2015.
Yeah, with Shane Montgomery, 21 years old. Last seen drinking, body found in the water just before Christmas. The circumstances just fit the profile enough that the smiley face connection was brought up again in the media and online forums.
It's like an urban legend that just won't go away.
Pretty much. It taps into that fear, that possibility of a hidden danger. And when you have unexplained deaths, people look for explanations. And sometimes a grand, sinister theory is more compelling, maybe even more comforting in a strange way, than random tragic accidents.
So the prevailing view now among experts and law enforcement is largely that it's a myth. Correlation, not causation. Seeing patterns that aren't really there.
That's generally the consensus, yes.
Yeah.
That the evidence connecting these cases via a smiley face signature is minimal at best, and the alternative explanation, tragic accidents involving alcohol and water, sadly counts for most, if not all of them.
And yet, that question mark still hangs there for some people, doesn't it? Even with the debunking.
It does. Because you still have those nagging inconsistencies in some cases, like McNeil's. And you have grieving families who are desperate for answers. So the question lingers. Could there be something there, even if it's not the grand conspiracy Gannon and Duarte proposed? What do you make of it all listening to this? It's easy to see how the pattern seemed convincing, but also how it could be explained away.
It's really complex. We've walked through this whole chilling theory, the Smiley Face Murders, looked at why it took hold, those patterns, the graffiti.
Less similar.
And then the arguments that really tried to pull it apart piece by piece.
And it really shows you, doesn't it, how vital it is to look at things from different angles, how a powerful story can emerge and persist, even when the official version is different. We just, as humans, seem wired to find those narratives, those explanations.
Absolutely. And, you know, whether you believe in a smiley face killer or not, the fact remains that these were all young lives lost tragically. And for some families, these are still very much unsolved mysteries, regardless of the official classification.
That's the core tragedy that shouldn't get lost in the debate about the theory itself.
Right. It really makes you wonder what other patterns might be out there hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to connect the dots, or maybe waiting for someone to connect dots that shouldn't be connected.
A fine line sometimes.
Indeed. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. It's a lot to think about. We're curious to hear what you think about the smiley face theory. Find us online. Share your thoughts.
Yeah, let us know your take.
And please do remember to like, share, and subscribe to the Deep Dive channel. We'll be back soon with another exploration. Thanks for listening.